Hi guys, welcome to Sosin classes. This is Hima Hegde presenting before you the current and contemporary affairs in anthropology. The first topic for today is CRISPR and HIV. Scientists are using new advances in CRISPR gene editing technology to uncover new biology that could lead to longer lasting treatments and new therapeutic strategies for human immunodeficiency virus, that is HIV. The HIV epidemic has been overlooked during the COVID 19 pandemic but represents a critical and ongoing threat to human health with an estimated 1.5 million new infections in the last year alone. Drug developers and research teams have been searching for cures and new treatment modalities for HIV over 40 years but are limited by their understanding of how the virus establishes infections in the human body. Scientists use a new CRISPR gene editing approach to identify human genes that were important for HIV infection in the blood, finding 86 genes that may play a role in the way HIV replicates and causes disease, including over 40 that have never been looked at in the context of HIV infection. The existing drug treatments are one of our most important tools in fighting the HIV epidemic and have been amazingly effective at suppressing the viral replication and spread. In the study, T cells, the major cell type targeted by HIV, were isolated from donated human blood and hundreds of genes were knocked out using CRISPR Cas9 gene editing. The knockout cells were then infected with HIV and analyzed. Cells that lost a gene important for the viral replication showed decreased infection, while cells that lost an antiviral factor showed an increase in infection. From there, the team validated the identified factors by selectively knocking them out in new donors, where they found a nearly even break of newly discovered pathways and well researched ones. The team is excited about further developing this technology to enable genome wide screening, where they independently knock out to turn on every gene in the human genome to identify all potential HIV host factors. These data would represent a critical piece in puzzle which would bring them even closer to the curative strategies. Let us now talk about the Neolithic times and diseases. After the Neolithic, European populations showed an increase in height and intelligence, reduced skin pigmentation, and increased risk of cardiovascular disease due to genetic changes that lowered concentrations of good HDL cholesterol. The changes reflect ongoing evolutionary processes in humans and highlight the impact of the Neolithic revolution had on our lifestyle and health. Researchers of these past events offers interesting starting points for today's science and healthcare. Just like plants, animals and other organisms, humans are dynamic organisms with variable traits. Look at how humans behave and their appearance and you will see differences in skin color, eating habits, susceptibility to diseases, height and so on. Such external features are called as phenotype. The appearance, that is, the phenotype, can be influenced, for example, genetic factors, social and cultural habits, eating, behavior, and environmental factors. They can be influenced by these. You take all human genes, that is, genome, to see which genes have an effect on height. It's not causal relationship. That is, you do not know exactly how those genes influence height, but a statistical relationship. That is, it is always the same genes that show up when height is determined. In a large population study, you can get a list of genes involved in human height and compare this list of genes of modern Europeans with those of our distant ancestors. Archaeological research has unearthed already more than 800 people whose DNA has been mapped. Ultimately, This reference gives you a kind of timeline of European height genes in which you can search for changes and turning points along the way. The researchers analyzed not only height but also other complex features such as skin pigmentation, weight or BMI, liquid metabolism, intelligence, and cardiovascular disease. The Neolithic, that is the New Stone Age, is an important period in human development, often referred to as the Neolithic Revolution, which now wandering hunter gatherers slowly had a different lifestyle, that is, they settled, became farmers, changed the diet and norms. This evolutionary research into the change of human traits in Europeans past can also be useful for the present. It helps us understand the physiology of the contemporary humans, and we may be able to tailor public health measures better to specific populations. Research has learned, for example, that Asian populations already have an increased risk of metabolic and cardiovascular complications at a lower BMI compared to European populations. We can take that into account in prevention strategies. Look at the mass rural urban mitigation, the migration, which is accompanied by major changes in social and cultural habits, eating behavior, and environmental factors. The third topic for the day is queer anthropology. A disbelief in human evolution was associated with higher levels of prejudice, racist attitudes, and support of discriminatory behavior against blacks, immigrants, and the LGBTQ community in the US, according to recent research. Queer anthropology studies variations in the expression of sexuality and gender and the ways that the societies treat such differences in. Queer anthropology adopts an anti homophobic approach predicated on critiquing the denigration of sex or gender variation and empathizing with the subjects of that denigration, that is, those we call queer. 20th century anthropology publicized the existence of accepted homosexual behavior and integrated transgender people in societies around the world. From earlier anthropological work, we are now aware that societies' varying code for sexuality and gender relate to their overall value systems, and that such codes deeply socialize how people evaluate their experience and express their desires. Queer anthropology takes this already familiar anthropological sensibility in a new direction by identifying socio-cultural forces as forms of power that distribute rewards and punishment in unequal ways. It is based on an insight that an axis for organizing social life, sexuality is not a separate domain but is always intertwined with systems of meaning and structures of relations among people. Margaret Mead's path-breaking book, Sex and Temperament in Three Primitive Societies, deeply transformed thinking about sex roles. It challenged the idea that biological sex caused male and female personality differences. Socialization, Mead instead insisted not biology caused personality traits. It was cultures that linked qualities like aggression or nurturance to sex. Mead was mostly popular or influential because she brought these ideas to a wide audience. Now, Mead's argument that shaped society's temperaments anticipated the later differentiation between biological sex and gender. 20th century anthropology shapes how we think about queer life today. It explained the power of norms and the social mechanisms that created men and women in their image while also demonstrating that some societies, like the Navajo or the Burmese, did not reject but positively valued people who Westerners considered psychologically abnormal. Anthropology transformed Western understandings of sexuality and gender from evaluations based on sin, racial evolution, or psychopathology to understandings that cultural values varied and that society shaped the sex and gender expressions within them.
So that is it for today. Hope you found it informative. Thank you.